Hey Wafa, welcome to the podcast Startup Simplified. Great to have you here.
Hey man, thank you so much for inviting me.
Pleasure, Chief, pleasure. So let's jump straight into it. We will get into the details of what you've been doing as an entrepreneur. But let's start with your journey, right? I mean, what were the ambitions of Wafa in his high school? I mean, did you think of becoming an entrepreneur, of having your own business? What was it growing up? And where did you grow up, by the way?
I grew up in Jakarta. I did spend some time outside of Jakarta, different countries, different cities within Indonesia, because my father, he worked at the Central Bank of Indonesia, so he moved a lot.
Sure.
And because of that, actually, early on, I was interested in the world of international relations.
Okay.
Yeah. So never for a second, I thought that I would become an entrepreneur.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this journey is quite unexpected for me.
Sure.
So throughout my elementary, junior high, high school, I've always been interested in basically becoming a global citizen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I ended up studying political science and international relations in undergrad.
Sure.
I actually spent a few months in the foreign service.
Okay.
Yep. But decided to actually make the jump to private sector.
Which country were you serving during this foreign services time?
I was still basically in training.
Oh, okay.
In Indonesia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because of a few things that I discovered, right, during my time in the service, I realized that my passion was for something that is a bit more fast-paced, basically. Yeah.
Which year would that be, and how old were you at that time?
I was 19 years old, so I graduated a bit early from college by Indonesian standards. I skipped a couple of grades in elementary and junior high, so I graduated at 19, and then basically was in training at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also consulted for a few projects that they had. I think after about 3-4 months, I decided I wanted to do something a bit more fast-paced.
Sure.
And there weren't that many options at the time in Indonesia.
Sure.
This was 2011, 2012.
I mean, you graduated pretty early. I mean, 19, it's pretty early.
Yeah, it was quite
I mean, I'm the stark opposite. I completed my 3 years program in 5 years. I failed twice. So I think we have opposites out here, at least in that space. So how did it pan out for you after you decided to move away from the foreign services? What did you get into? We are still in 2011.
Yeah. So this was 2011, 2012. The world basically was recovering from the global financial crisis, right? And my understanding back then was that if you want to go far in private sector, there were two options. You go to high finance or management consulting.
Sure.
Yeah. And there were only a small number of firms, basically, that do exactly this in Jakarta at the time. I decided to basically apply to a number of banks, got a couple of internship offers, apprenticeship offers, basically, because I had no experience at all in this industry. And I just recently graduated at 19 years old. So they weren't expecting much from me. But there's this one bank, it's now called MUFG.
Sure.
They offered me a full-time role. And in fact, I was placed directly under the managing director for Jakarta at the time to basically help him.
Okay.
With projects, basically.
Sure.
So I took that opportunity, and the rest is history, as they say.
Ooh. At 19, reporting directly to a managing director of a bank.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't feel the pressure? I mean, it's someone who's like super senior, managing crazy amount of funds, folks reporting to him. What exactly was your role out there?
So what's interesting was exactly because I didn't have the traditional finance and business background that most of my fellow analysts in my analyst class had. They wanted me to do something different because they thought that I would be able to provide different perspectives, offer different perspectives. So what they asked me to do was basically to help them with planning. So I helped the managing director with a lot of the planning, business analysis, and basically internal coordination between different business units. And what's interesting as well was at the time, the bank just acquired a majority stake in Morgan Stanley. Basically, the bank saved Morgan Stanley from the crisis. So they were consolidating operations in Jakarta. So I was also basically was asked to manage what we call collaboration framework between this bank and Morgan Stanley. And that was my first direct exposure in the world of finance. I think looking back, I did not realize how big of a deal it was for a recent grad to do that. For me at the time, I didn't know much about the world, right? So for me at the time, this is just a job, right? So I'm just going to do my job. But I think now reading on it and looking back, I thought that was pretty miraculous for me with very little business and finance background to be able to do that.
How long were you with them?
I was there for 3.5 years.
3.5 years.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think we'll come back. We'll circle back on this one again once we go further in your journey, because I think there are a couple of very interesting snippets which we can cover again from your MUF journey.
Absolutely.
So how did this whole transition happen from a traditional bank to a Google? How did this happen?
It was also not planned. I think after about 3 years at the bank, they actually promoted me every year. So I joined as an analyst and then got promoted to associate in my second year and got promoted to senior associate in my third year. But what I saw was that in this world, in that world at the time, there's some sort of a glass ceiling that I will eventually hit if I try to cross a certain point. No matter what people say, I'm still a non-finance, non-business graduate, right? That have very little formal education in business. So, and I actually like my job at the time. So I thought, okay, well, if I want to keep doing this, then I have to reinvent myself. And one of the ways that I thought that I could do that was to go for an MBA at a good school. For me, it was also very new. I didn't know much about the world of MBA, business schools, grad school education, etc. But I ended up focusing on this one school that I really wanted to go to, which was Cambridge in the UK. I decided to apply with a lot of difficulty, I can tell you. As a non-quantitative person, I had to go through GMAT, which was, for me, was very difficult, right? I did pretty badly in my first attempt. But then I found a friend at the bank who was also working on her GMAT, and she was a quant person. But I think she did horribly in the reasoning section of the test, right? The verbal reasoning. So we help each other out. So we spent a lot of time basically helping each other out. And eventually I managed to get actually the bare minimum score that I needed to even apply. So I did apply and I got accepted. The challenge was then, obviously, financially, it cost a lot of money. To do an MBA in the UK, and I had some money saved from my years at the bank, and my parents, God bless their hearts, they were very supportive, right? But my parents did not come from a super privileged background. I just want to get that out of the way first, because I think a lot of people would assume that I come from a super privileged background, but that's not true at all.
Why would you say that a lot of people would assume this?
Yeah, I think a lot of people assume that because I go to work at a specific industry, at a specific place, and then manage to go to a specific school, and then coming back and then join a specific company and then doing these specific things, people would assume that I come from a super privileged background with super connections, etc. But that's not the case at all. And I know that people are not going to believe this. I think most people, when they hear this, and then they would say, of course you would say that, Wafa. But deep down inside, you know that's not true. But it's the truth. And I just, I don't know what other way to say it.
Well, I mean, it's easier to it's easier to judge than to think.
True.
And inquire.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much a part-time. It's a part-time hobby, I feel, in Asia, wherein we're like constantly judging everyone in and around.
We call that kepo in Indonesia.
See, you got a name for it.
Exactly.
Great. So, so you finished your masters, and you got into Google.
So I finished my master's with a government scholarship because I couldn't afford to pay for everything myself, right? I was actually considering a lot of options. So I considered delaying it for another year to defer it, basically. I considered actually taking out student loan from different banks, including my current employer at the time. But I actually ended up getting a government scholarship from the Ministry of Finance. It's called LPDP. So thank you, Bu Sri Mulyani. And basically the scholarship covered for everything. They paid for everything. And this was also not common because usually the Indonesian government usually doesn't pay full scholarship for MBA programs.
Sure.
It's just not common. Yeah.
I mean, it's a senior scholarship. So, I mean.
Yeah. And it's a pretty expensive program.
I'm sure.
But they did. And I'm super thankful. So I went and then I graduated in 2017. And then I came back to Indonesia, which is a condition of the scholarship. You have to come back. And I was never interested in working in Europe or the States or anything like that, because even at the time I knew Asia was going to be the next big thing. And especially in Southeast Asia, Indonesia easily the biggest economy in Southeast Asia.
Sure.
So I've always known that I would want to come back anyway. So it makes sense to take a government scholarship. I came back and joined Shopee first.
Okay.
So I spent about a year at Shopee.
Doing what? Very briefly?
Yeah. Doing business development, category management, data analysis.
Sure.
Well, Shopee was a 1-year-old startup at the time.
So you're like coming from an extremely organized bank to an extremely unorganized startup.
Yes. And at the time, not a lot of people knew what Shopee was.
Sure.
At the time, they were not this huge name that everybody knew, right? They were basically the new kid on the block, banging on the doors. They were dominated by Tokopedia and the likes, right?
Sure.
So it was also quite an interesting set of options that I had graduating. I got offers from several different banks. But I decided to go to Shopee because something told me at the time that something was telling me that the tech industry in Indonesia is going to boom, right? And if I didn't go for it back then, it would have been too late for me. So I decided to take that risk. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. And then post that, you moved to Google.
Yes. So after about a year at Shopee, I joined Google in late 2017.
Sure. So let's talk about your first venture.
Sure.
Right. I think it's a very special one for every entrepreneur. The first venture.
Yeah.
I want to understand why start what you started.
Yeah.
Number one, why, and second is, I personally feel founders are the most audacious people, right? I mean, they tend to do things which probably any person with reasons and being reasonable would not, right? So, why did you start what you started? And where did you get this will from?
Sure.
Right? That, okay, hey, listen, I'm going to leave my well-paying job and I'm just going to push myself into this.
Yeah. So my first exposure to the tech industry was actually while I was studying at Cambridge. Cambridge was situated right next to basically UK Silicon Valley, Silicon Valley they call it. It's where all the big tech companies are based in the UK. And that was my first exposure. So I got to meet different companies, different startups that were based in Silicon Valley. And I ended up doing a summer project while I was at Cambridge for Grab. basically helping them with market entry strategy, etc. And that was my first exposure
Sure.
in the tech industry. So when I graduated in 2017, I already was interested in tech, and that's why I decided to go with Shopee, right, as my first job right out of grad school. And then I spent another year at Google. So after 2 years, 2.5 years being exposed to tech, I was really interested in the opportunity it offers to people to build something and scaling it at a very short time, which from my understanding in the banking industry was not possible because it was mostly a people-driven and relationship-driven business.
Correct.
Right? You cannot use tech to scale. In the banking industry, tech was infrastructure, right? It's a tool. But in the tech industry, well, tech is the core of it.
Core of it.
Whatever you build, it scales through tech, right? It's not just an infrastructure. It really is the soul of the product. And I was just fascinated by that possibility. So after a couple of years at Google, and I cannot credit just myself for the founding of Modal Rakyat, I got connected to an old friend of mine that I got to know during my years in the banking industry. His name is Stanis. And basically he came to me with the idea for Modal Rakyat.
Sure.
And Stanis ended up becoming my co-founder at Modal Rakyat, and he ended up becoming the CEO for the first couple of years at Modal Rakyat. So basically the idea was just, it's pretty simple. It's to combine my knowledge and experience in finance and his knowledge and experience in finance and with my knowledge and experience in tech and try to solve a problem in Indonesia that we knew could be solved.
And what was that problem?
It was a pretty simple problem. The inability for small businesses to raise financing.
Okay. And we're talking about 2017 or 16?
This was 2017, late.
2017.
Yeah. Late 2017, early 2018. Yeah.
Sure.
I remember meeting Stanis at the Google cafeteria in Jakarta. So I invited him to come over. Yeah, just come, bro, and check out my office.
Sure. What was he doing at that point?
I think he was, he recently left his previous startup.
Sure.
So for him, it was his second startup.
Sure.
Yeah, but I don't know if I can talk about that startup.
No,
So probably wouldn't.
I remember meeting Stanis somewhere in 2018.
Yeah.
I was consulting for a marketing technology firm at
Right.
that point.
Yeah.
And
So
I remember he
probably,
was just getting started with
Yeah.
Modal Rakyat. The office was somewhere in the North Jakarta, if I'm not wrong, back then.
I think our first office was actually in South Jakarta, near Pondok Indah area. So it was a ruko. It's a small office, home office.
Yes, I think that's the same office where I met him back then.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about Modal Rakyat for a minute over here. So you found your co-founder, Stanis, while you were working with Google. He had already started Modal Rakyat by then.
He has not.
He
just has the idea,
Okay.
and he has a couple of other co-founders that were also interested in doing this, and then we had an investor.
Okay.
So the next couple of weeks after meeting Stanis was basically me meeting all the other co-founders and the investor.
Sure.
Yeah. And then once we have sort of decided collectively that I think we can do this together, that's when we basically decided to launch it. Yeah. This was early 2018.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, let's dwell a bit more on this journey.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, till the time you guys exited or merged with Faz.
Yeah.
What was this whole journey like? Was this your first entrepreneurial journey? And you would be what, 26, 27?
2018, I would have been 26. Yeah.
26.
Yeah. I was
Right. So you're 26-year-old.
Yeah.
And you've started this journey into a very regulated market, which is of financing.
Yeah.
How does that work? I mean, how do you go about doing things in this regulated market?
Yeah. So Modal Rakyat was not my first entrepreneurial journey. But to be fair, I started maybe some side businesses that didn't really work out.
Okay.
So I tried agency business. I tried interior design business.
I think this is a different podcast altogether.
Yeah.
I think we should do one
Exactly.
more.
But
Just to talk about the...
I tried English mentoring business, basically trying to teach people English. I tried all kinds of different different ideas, different companies that didn't work out.
So in a nutshell, you always wanted to do things on your own. I mean, you wanted to be a... I mean, look, entrepreneur is a very... I believe it's become a very popular term in the last few years. But I would rather use, a word like you always wanted to become a businessman of sorts, right? You always wanted to have something of your own.
I think at the time, the word entrepreneur or even businessman didn't come to mind. I think it was just mostly this sense or feeling of, I think I can do more, right? But there's a limit to what you can do more at your day job, right?
Sure.
So, and I had a lot of energy. So I needed to channel this energy somewhere, basically, right? So I decided to channel this energy to different things, trying out different stuff. And I can tell you that there are more failed businesses that I've started than the ones that have succeeded. So the ones that people know now, that are covered in media, etc., those are the successful ones. I mean, those are the ones that took off to a certain point, right? But there were many more that people have heard nothing about. They would probably laugh if they heard about it, right? That basically failed. And I learned a lot from those failed businesses.
Sure. Yeah. Interesting. So, I mean, coming back to Modal Rakyat, right? I mean, so you guys get started. You start scaling it.
Yeah.
How was it? How was the experience of raising funds back then, 2018, 2019?
Oh, it was very difficult. It was very difficult because, again, like you said, we entered a highly regulated market, and we definitely were not the first player in the market, right? There were already other major players in the market at the time, and there wasn't a lot of interest in investing in such a highly regulated space with unclear, unique selling proposition, etc. So fundraising was difficult. But what we managed to do actually was to have a sustainable business model, a product that people actually use, and a business model that actually works, and customers that are actually willing to pay.
Sure.
Things that actually are sometimes elusive for startups who even successfully fundraise, right? These days.
Correct.
So we didn't manage to fundraise, but we managed to basically do all those things. And because we managed to do all those things, we didn't technically need to fundraise unless we want to grow like 10, 20, 30 times faster than the way that we were growing. But we didn't technically need to fundraise.
Sure.
But we knew that this was working, and we knew that we just had to wait it out until the time comes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nice. So how did this whole exit happen from Modal Rakyat?
Yeah.
What was the mood like at that point? I mean, was it a planned one? How did you go about that?
Yeah, for us, I think it made a lot of sense in terms of the ecosystem and in terms of the synergy. Our first investor was actually Hendra, who's the CEO of us, who's now also a close friend of mine and who also invested in UpBanx. So basically, after COVID, we saw an opportunity to basically streamline our operations, and there was a lot of issues in the overall financial industry at the time.
Correct.
With small businesses basically failing to make payments, et cetera. So for us, it made a lot of sense to basically join a larger group in which we would be able to leverage a much stronger and healthier balance sheet, stronger and healthier ecosystem, and have all of our products embedded into all their different platforms.
Sure.
So for us, it made a lot of sense. Yeah.
But is it easy for an entrepreneur to detach himself or herself from what they have created?
Yeah.
I mean, look, it all sounds good. It makes sense what you just mentioned from a synergies perspective. But this is something which you've built, right? I mean, you've built it grounds up.
Yeah.
And not give it away. Give it away would be a wrong word.
Yeah.
But to part slightly away from it and let someone else do it.
Yeah.
I mean, talk more about that. I'm curious to understand this phase.
Yeah. This is probably going to sound a bit spiritual, but I try not to be attached to things.
Okay.
Even as an entrepreneur, I try not to be attached to my companies. So, in fact, my whole working model as an entrepreneur is to eventually get my companies to a point where even I, as the founder, cannot stop it.
Okay.
Cannot stop its growth, cannot stop its evolution, cannot stop its dynamics, etc. Because then at that point, that means I have successfully built a company that operates by itself, that is serving customers, that I managed to build a team that can run it well, and it doesn't need me anymore. So actually, I consider it a success, a massive success when a company doesn't need me anymore.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
I don't know how many entrepreneurs think this way, but it's definitely how I think.
Sure.
So, but I don't want to scare my investors and make it sound like I'm trying to
He is detached. He is
leave my
detached.
companies and detach from my companies. But that's not the point. But my idea is to not let my companies depend and rely on me as an individual,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Because if that's the case, then probably what I'm building, the company that I'm building, the product that I'm building, is probably not that good of a company or not that good of a product. Right?
It needs you always.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because it always needs me.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's actually a milestone.
But is this philosophy of yours applicable only towards the startups which you're building, or it's a general life philosophy for you?
Well, initially it was just a philosophy for my companies, but for me personally, a lot of things happened within the last couple of years, personal events that have transformed my way of thinking as well. So I have now basically I've started to become more detached from worldly things.
Would you
as
be
well, I guess.
comfortable expanding on these events, or?
Yeah, sure. So my father got very sick in 2020, and we went through a lot of crisis. Basically, at the time, we went through a hard time as a family. Thankfully, my dad is recovered today.
That's right.
Yeah, so he's now healthy. But I went through a lot in 2020.
Sure.
And then in 2021, I actually, so my wife got pregnant, and then we actually lost the baby. Yeah. So that was a very difficult time for me as well. So it's almost like 2 years of consecutive tragedies for me.
Sure.
In 2020 and 2021, right? And I think that was also a factor that contributes to why I decided to leave Google, because I just thought that at the time, wow, life is so fickle. Life is so short.
Sure.
My thinking was at the time, I don't want to spend a single minute doing anything that I don't want to do. Considering all the things that happened to me within the past couple of years. So it took a lot of courage for me to leave Google and then focus on my companies full-time, etc. But that was a huge factor. But also as a result of that, I actually delved deeper into different spiritual ideas, I would say. So I was born in a conservative Muslim family. This is Indonesia. Most Muslim families are conservative,
Sure.
including my parents, right?
Sure.
So I delved a bit deeper into the broader side of spirituality as opposed to diving deeper into religions. So I read a lot, and then learned a lot from people, from different teachings, from YouTube,
Sure.
watched a lot of videos. And I slowly developed this philosophy of basically being able to affirm myself that everything is going to be okay. That there's no need to worry about anything, that there's no need to stress about anything, and that I shouldn't be attached to any worldly possessions because it's not real. But by recognizing that, actually, so this may be a bit counterintuitive, by recognizing that everything is going to be okay and that this world is a grand stage in which we are the actors, I was able to muster a lot of energy and a lot of courage to do a lot of things in this world. So it's the opposite, as opposed to becoming a hermit that maybe go to a mountain and then maybe shave my head and then not eat anything and not do anything and then meditate in the mountains for 20 hours a day. I'm actually now becoming more energized and more encouraged to do more things in this world. because I know exactly that this is a play. Might be a bit counterintuitive, but that's what I felt.
So, I mean, again, just for the sake of argument,
Yeah.
if it is a play and if it has already been staged,
Mm-hmm.
then it doesn't matter if one does or does not act, right? Just for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
But I understand.
Yeah.
I've had these arguments a lot
Yeah.
with a lot of my friends. My wife, she's crazily spiritually aligned. But I hear you and I agree completely with you. I mean, the best we can do is to give our 100% and work.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, results, you cannot control the results.
Yeah.
There are so many variables at play.
Yeah.
You just can't control it. This was good. This was good.
Mhm.
Good insights.
Mhm.
Okay, let's move towards what you're doing now.
Sure.
Right. So just before we started recording,
Yeah.
I told you I have a lot of questions.
You seem like you do.
Yeah, especially on UpBanx, right? So you are back to something which you love, which is finance.
Yeah.
With Modal Rakyat, MUF,
Yeah.
and now UpBanx. But why this only for creators?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at Google, I spent a lot of years working in the YouTube side of things. I met a lot of creators, and even back then, I knew that this world of creators was going to be something that is really influential.
Sure.
And not just in terms of how it generates economic value, but how it shapes values and discussions in society. Might be brazen to say this, but I would say that influencers today, especially the top ones, have more influence over how society thinks and how society perceives things. So for me, building something that could help these people do their work, right, and enable them, and to ensure that not a single creative mind passes up an opportunity just because they don't have the upfront money to do it, which is what UpBanx is trying to solve.
Sure.
Or just because they don't have the tool to do it, which is what upThinks is trying to solve, which is our AI, generative AI product. I think something that could be my life's mission, because I've experienced it myself. I've seen the power of creativity, the power of creation, and I'd like to believe that we're here to create. People are born in this world to create.
Sure.
So whatever I can do, whatever I can build to help creators create, would be a mission worth pursuing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I mean, let's give a very simple explanation to our audience.
Yeah.
About what exactly UpBanx does, and what is this whole upthink AI element.
Yeah.
Out here. Let's just do that.
Sure. So what UpBanx does is very simple. We help every single creative business and creative mind in Indonesia get access to financing.
Okay.
To capital. And why? Because traditionally, creative businesses in Indonesia have not been able to gain access to financing because of the nature of the business, and sometimes the age of the business, and how it's mostly personality driven,
Sure.
as opposed to product or business model driven.
Define creative businesses over here, please.
Yeah. So in Indonesia, typically we have what we call small and micro businesses, which are UMKM, and creative business or creative economy creative, which is why you also see there are two different ministries actually supervising these two different segments. Kementerian Koperasi and UMKM for small and micro businesses, and Kementerian Pariwisata and Ekonomi Kreatif, Ministry of Tourism and the Creative Economy for creative businesses. The key difference between a small and micro business and a creative business is that creative business has intangible value that is attached to its product or service.
Correct.
So it doesn't matter what you do, whether it's a spicy chip or a YouTube video or an Instagram profile or an agency, right? If it has an intangible value that justify why people want to use your product or pay for your product, because they love that intangible value. That is a creative business.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm a musician, an independent musician.
Yeah.
Would I fall into a category of someone who can approach UpBanx for finance?
Absolutely. We work with music publishers. Some of our customers are musicians and songwriters. Yeah. So absolutely. Yeah.
So I mean, how come do you justify giving out finance?
Yeah.
To these artists, wherein I mean the income sources are varied.
Exactly.
Right. That is one of the primary reasons I believe traditional finance houses like banks or NBFCs and finance houses are not willing to risk it.
Yeah.
How does it work for UpBanx?
Yeah. So exactly because I came from the traditional side of finance, right? Which looks at companies in a very traditional way. Like I look at discounted cash flows and balance sheets, income statements, which most of these creative businesses don't even have.
Correct.
And they have a very different risk profile, right? That is exactly the reason why UpBanx exists, because we want to bridge that gap. In reality, if you talk to banks, if you talk to multi-finance institutions, even if you talk to government, right, they want to support creative businesses.
Correct.
How many Nobel-winning scientists you know that come from Indonesia? Nobel Prize-winning scientists.
I don't think any. None, right?
But the world recognizes Indonesian musicians.
Correct.
Indonesian actors and actresses. Right? Indonesian songwriters. And the world recognizes
Indonesian meme accounts.
Right? And the world recognizes Indonesian tourism spots.
Sure.
Right? So I'm not sure if this sounds stereotypical, but I believe Indonesia in its soul, in its heart and mind, is a creative country.
I can't agree more on this.
Right?
I mean, last 6 years I've been living in Indonesia, and I personally feel people are the most creative I have ever met.
Exactly.
And I've worked and lived across Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
I mean, I can absolutely bet Indonesians are the most creative, even in the smallest day-to-day activities as well.
We figure out creative ways of doing different things.
Absolutely.
Figure out different solutions. And I'm not trying to discourage our young people, young audiences watching there studying engineering or math. Go for it, right?
Yeah.
If that's your calling, go for it. But I think collectively as a country, deep inside the soul of Indonesian, there's a creative spark that exists in every person breathing in this country, right? So there's a lot of willingness to support this side of the economy, but there's not much ability to do it because why? They're unable to assess the risk, right? They're unable to recover bad debts, for example, in this industry. They are unable to properly create or build pipelines of creative businesses that can come and then grow and maybe replace other old existing creative businesses and make it a sustainable cycle in the economy. So UpBanx is there to help creative businesses achieve exactly that. So one of the ways we do this is that you can simply connect your YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok accounts with our platform, and we can basically able to take that data and then build a credit profiling.
Okay.
That we can combine with the credit model that exists in our financing partners, which can be banks, multi-finance firms, the government, etc., and then actually disburse financing.
Okay.
So that's one way that that we're able to do that.
Sure.
And secondly, the reason why traditional financial institutions don't want to lend to this specific segment, because they wouldn't know what to do if someone fails to make a payment.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, if you look from an outsider's perspective at the creative economy, there's always that risk which a lender would feel that, okay, hey, listen, what if this does not work? There's no fixed source of income.
Exactly.
So how do I recover my debt?
Exactly. Creators generally are willing, in order to compensate or to allow for their partners to recover losses, for example, they're willing to produce work that is directly associated with recovering that specific loss. Okay. So, for example, if a creator fails to make a payment of 500 million, for example, we can actually arrange an agreement in which we can source work for this creator, and then the payment for that work is then used
directly to UpBanx.
Yes, to recover that losses.
Interesting.
And this can be done at scale as we expand partnerships with more institutions and companies that actually provide work for these creators.
But you already have this ecosystem ready now, or it's a work in progress?
We have it in a small scale, I would say, because we just started last year, right?
Of course.
So right now we have about roughly 2,000 customers, 2,000 users, and around 60% are brands and agencies or corporations, and 40% are creators, right?
Sure.
So actually, we're trying to capture the entire value chain, in which the ones who provide the work and the ones that are actually doing the work are part of the same ecosystem.
Nice.
Yeah. So that is what we're trying to do. We want to make sure that everything is connected. Everyone is connected in a single platform, so that whenever these things happen, when someone fails to make a payment, etc., a work then can be sourced to this specific creator that is encountering this payment issue
This is very interesting.
for this person to recover.
It's very interesting. Very interesting.
And that is how, just to give you a specific number, so far we have 0 failed payments.
Woo.
Yes. For all the financing that we have helped our financing partners disburse for the creative segment, since we started, we have 0 failed payments. There are some late payments here and there, right? But they pay penalties and then it's settled, right?
No NPAs.
Yes, but there hasn't been a single failed payment.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Coming to the next one. So I'll share my thoughts first, and then we can expand on this. So I personally feel that most of these startups today in and around Asia as well as the globe are adding artificial intelligence as a part of their offerings. At times for no reason at all.
Without reason at all. Yeah.
Without any use case. Probably it's a buzzword, very exciting for the investors. I mean, I am not downplaying the role of AI. I personally believe it is the future. But at the same time, you can't really just take AI into anything and everything. Right. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. Right. Now, on that note, without cornering you, let's talk about the AI piece and upThinks.
For sure. Yeah. So we've actually been using AI since the very start of UpBanx.
Okay.
But it's not something that we externalize. So AI, we've been using it to basically build the credit profile that we provide to financing partners. Because all of these different creative businesses connect their accounts, so they basically feed us the data.
Fair use
like
case.
revenue
Absolutely
and
fair
data
use
metrics,
case.
etc. Right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense for us to then use AI to take this data and then crawl all of the other public profiles out there and try to build prediction models on how well this person can do, etc., etc. So we've actually been using AI, but not generative AI.
Of course.
AI to build basically effective credit profiles. Now, when the buzz around generative AI came, we talked to our users. Right, we talk to our users. Typically, when we talk to our users and we ask them what's their number one problem, their answer is always the same: cash flow. But that piece is already being worked on by UpBanx. So we're already trying to solve that specific piece.
Correct.
And then we ask them, what's their second biggest pain point? It's actually content creation.
Okay.
Because their entire life, their entire work, their entire business is built around creating content.
Correct.
That's how they make money.
Correct.
And why brands and agencies pay them is because they expect content from these people, right?
Correct.
And even as a small creative business, let's say you are a small spicy chip brand, right? You still need to promote your products on social media.
Correct.
And you need to still create content marketing. So content generation apparently is the second biggest pain point after cash flow. But it's not something that is on top of their mind, because even the cash flow problem is already super painful. So the whole content generation thing is probably on the back of their mind. So we asked them, what if we can help you produce more content more efficiently at scale?
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically how the idea for upThinks came.
Sure.
And this is what I experienced myself as well as a micro influencer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So at this point, we would like to know what is upThinks.
Okay, so upThinks is basically a platform where people can use the different templates that we have to leverage generative AI to create content. So the kind of content that we currently support on upThinks are text-based content.
Okay.
So think of things like caption, video scripts,
Sure.
metadata like titles, hashtags, right,
Sure.
tags, etc. And then things like, for example, ideas, briefs, pitches, etc. So right now we have about 20, 25 different templates that are available on upThinks that people can basically just input what they need, and then upThinks will then generate the appropriate text-based content for their needs. And it can also be adjusted based on audience target, tone, brand style, voice, etc., etc. So that is currently the version of upThinks that we have that are currently live for users. But we have a lot more in the work.
Sure.
So we have things like real-time trends integration, which will allow users to generate content based on what is currently trending on different platforms.
Sure.
So that is coming.
Interesting.
And the second piece that we're working on is actually real-time internet integration. So right now, generative AI models are limited to what is the cut-off
2020
point in time, right? Where you
2020.
basically feed the data into the model.
Correct.
But what we're working on right now is actually real-time internet integration, in which the AI will actually be able to browse the internet.
Real time.
Pull the necessary data to be able to generate the specific content that you need. So
Interesting.
So for me as a micro influencer, I experienced this problem. So okay, I'm a startup founder, but I'm also a micro influencer because I have 15,000 followers on Instagram, 35,000 followers on LinkedIn. So sometimes I would get requests from small brands and small agencies to do a bit of endorsement work, right?
Sure. I'm about to request one after this podcast.
So the moment the brief comes to me, and then I take a look at the brief, it usually would take me around 2 to 4 days for me to be able to come up with ideas for content,
Correct.
topics,
Correct.
caption, right? Because inspiration doesn't come suddenly. So sometimes creative people need to spend some time drinking coffee, vaping, smoking, right? Playing guitar, looking at sunset, trying to find inspiration.
Sure.
But upThinks can actually cut down this process to mere seconds.
Sure.
So instead of wasting days trying to think of an inspiration or ideas, you can actually just input the brief to upThinks. And then upThinks will generate an unlimited amount of different ideas that you can use as a starting point. That's the key. It's not meant to be a final piece of work that you use. It's meant to help you start. And we all know that starting is typically the hardest part
Correct.
of doing creative work.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's the key. And then when you have produced the content, you will submit the content back to the agency, right? And then the agency will then submit the content to the brand. It can then take up to a week for the brand to come up with some feedback to the agency, and for the agency to process that feedback and then raise that request for us to do some revisions.
Yeah, sounds fair.
Right?
Yeah.
But that process can also be shortened using upThinks.
But I mean, okay, very interesting work. And I completely agree that ideation, especially ideation, is the most crucial part. But don't you think, in your conversation with these creators, aren't they afraid of AI itself, which looks like it has started to create content on its own, completely AI generated content, is being pushed out there on various platforms? Isn't that something which they're afraid of right now?
I think a lot of people are right now afraid of AI. So beyond text, we have seen AI generating pictures, clips, voiceovers, even songs, right? I think that's going to be a huge change. There's going to be a huge kick in the butt for the entire economy for us to introduce that upfront. So we decided to slowly introduce AI, which is why we started with text.
Makes sense.
Not to mention that the cost for building the products for different asset type, content is typically more expensive, right?
Correct.
So there's a thicker cost of revenue component there. While tax is typically cheaper, so it makes sense from an economic standpoint. But our proposition is AI should be able to help you generate more pieces of content. So you shouldn't think in the frame of, oh, with AI right now, maybe a brand doesn't need 100 creators. Maybe a brand only needs 10 creators, right?
Correct.
So they can pay maybe only 10% of what they used to pay.
True.
I think that's what most people fear, right?
Correct.
And then for the people working for the creators, they would fear something like, oh, right now, instead of having 3 copywriters, now you only need 1 maybe, right? So 2 people will lose their jobs.
Rather than having a editor, you can just basically edit by uploading your content in free tools out there.
Exactly. But we also shouldn't forget that this is also the same fear, I think, during the early industrial revolution era, when factories, assembly lines were first introduced. I think a lot of people were afraid.
I mean, look, I've heard this argument. To a large extent, I agree. But I have one major disagreement with this argument. The disagreement is that the available jobs while the industrialization was happening were in plenty. Right? There were plenty of opportunities outside of the traditional work when the industrialization began. Like, let's say, for example, if I was a weaver and textiles came in, I could learn the art of working in a textile factory. So I was employable, right? Whereas the speed at which AI is capturing lot of different work styles, as well as a lot of different work verticals, I'm scared at times. I'm like, how quickly can humans adapt to it? How quickly can I upskill myself?
Sure. So when you say jobs, especially when we are referring to the early industrial revolution era, we typically think of traditional corporate jobs.
Correct.
Right? Salary jobs with benefits, etc. And I agree with you. In the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we may see overall fewer traditional jobs. But then on the other hand, we will see a massive rise in the creator economy because people will then start taking more freelance jobs. That's why we've seen the rise of platforms like Fiverr, Upwork. People around the world, even though they're working a full-time corporate job, they're also taking on jobs from platforms like Fiverr, Upwork, maybe to do a bit of a graphic design, maybe to do a bit composing, script writing, etc. Right?
Sure.
So on one hand, I agree. I think traditional job, as in corporate salary job with benefits, with long tenure, etc., will probably slowly be phased out, replaced by a more dynamic, more open. I'm not sure if gig economy is the right term. Sometimes when I hear gig economy, it sounds like...
It's a bit confusing, to be honest.
It's a bit confusing, but what I would say is actually a job market that is more flexible, more open, that is more customized and oriented towards the individual as opposed to the institution. And that actually is going to transfer a lot of the power to the individual doing the actual work, right? And in the short term, yes, maybe most people wouldn't be able to so quickly adapt with all of these different AI tools. But I think in the longer term, I don't think it's something to be worried about. Eventually, just like how people are not used to internet, for example, 30 years ago, eventually people are going to adapt. So I think AI is just going to be the same. Eventually people are going to adapt, and we may see the loss of traditional corporate jobs. We may see a bit of shock here and there, some sectors of the economy. And then we may see some deflation because then probably wages will go down from the digital industries.
Correct.
And then money shifting to the creator economy. But then in the long term, I think the overall positive, the overall impact will be positive.
Let's hope for that. Let's hope for that. I'm rooting for that.
I'm betting on that. I'm banking on that.
You are banking on that. Literally
banking.
Banking on that. Okay. I mean, let's move from AI to something which is more traditional.
Yeah.
In terms of an advice, right? So the more and more founders and investors I meet, there's one constant advice which keeps going on that, hey, listen, you should focus on one idea at a time. You should build one company at a time.
Yeah.
You're not Elon Musk.
Yeah.
You can't do this. And here we are. You are on the board of Modal Rakyat. You're a co-founder at VC Gamers.
Yeah.
And you are a co-founder at UpBanx.
Yes. I'm also a board member at Bebas Invest, a social investing startup.
Perfect. How does this work?
Yeah. So I believe that no entrepreneur succeeds alone. So just to give it an idea, at Modal Rakyat, I have 3 co-founders. At VC Gamers, I have 3 co-founders. At UpBanx, I have 2 co-founders. So 3, 2, 8, and I have 3 co-founders at Bebas. So I have 12
co-founders out there.
Right? So
that's like having your own football team.
Exactly. So I also want to dispel this myth. Like, I honestly don't believe that Elon Musk achieves everything that Tesla or SpaceX or Solar City or Neuralink achieve alone. He has probably dozens of hardworking executives, right? Co-founders, board members, shareholders in those companies that are actually doing the hard day-to-day operational work, building value for the company, right? But Elon Musk is the figure uniting it all. He builds the narrative, right?
Correct.
He ensures that synergy between these different companies exists, right? And he makes sure that they're united in a single vision, right? So I think of it that way. I don't believe in a solo entrepreneur that... I hate the term self-made, especially when I'm reading all these different magazines.
Oh, self-made, yeah. I mean,
I don't even know what it is.
I mean, you have your supporters throughout the journey.
Exactly.
I mean,
no one is ever self-made.
I completely agree with
exactly.
This. I mean, I think it's a very pompous term.
Yeah.
Probably a self-ego massage of sorts.
Exactly. Right? And we have to think of the employees as well, right?
True.
Modal Rakyat has 100 employees today.
Sure.
VC Gamers has 70.
Sure.
Right? UpBanx has 40. Bebas has maybe 20, right? So we have 250 people working across my 4 different companies, and I have 12 leaders that I motivate every day, right? We meet regularly, offline and online, for coffee. And I even, at some point in time, I managed to gather all of them in Bali.
Ooh,
in one table.
Okay.
Just for us to get to know each other.
Sure.
So all these different companies, all these different co-founders, and their only common thread is me. Sure. In all of their companies. Right. So I believe in moving far and moving fast together.
Sure.
And I believe in me not being this solo entrepreneur that is doing all the work by myself and then being perceived as some sort of a Superman that runs on caffeine and nicotine and alcohol or all those things, right? But I believe in an entrepreneurial mind that is able to bring different people and unite them in a vision.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds really good. I mean, I always believe
in theory.
Yeah, in theory as well as in execution, you have executed it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you've already walked your talk.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, out there, you are actively involved in these 4 companies. Right. Do you sleep?
I sleep.
Generally, what's the average?
On average, I sleep 6 to 7 hours.
Managing 4 companies.
Yeah.
Guys, you can all do it.
But just last night, actually, I slept for 3 hours because there was a lot of work to do.
Sure.
But it's very rare. It's very rare for me to sleep at like 4 or 5 a.m. like I did last night because of a lot of work that came up. But it's very rare. Most days I can sleep 6 to 7 hours a night. No problem. No issue. In fact, I have to. Otherwise, I would get cranky and become dysfunctional during the day.
Same. I mean, I can't operate. In my complete sense if I have slept like less than 7 hours.
Yes.
And I'm like, boss, whatever your theories are, 4 hours entrepreneur should sleep for. I'm like, cannot.
And
this is what it is.
And for me, the model of entrepreneur being focused on a single idea, single company, single product is the model that most people do, right?
Yep.
So why don't I try something different, right? I think it's part of my contribution to the world that which is to experiment with something different.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
There's no right or wrong, and
Right.
this is not a competition, right?
Absolutely.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with taking on a slightly different approach.
Completely with you.
Yeah.
Completely
Yeah.
with you. Well, I mean, talking on multiple entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
which you are into right now. Let's talk about the whole funding winter which we have,
Sure.
so-called funding winter.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? I mean, you're active in the community over here
Sure.
in Indonesia. What are your thoughts? Where are we heading?
I think this is definitely a difficult time. I just want to recognize that first. For a lot of startups, for a lot of founders, for a lot of employees out there, it's a very difficult time. But I also think that this is the best time to build,
I agree.
because without the noise of fundraising,
Correct.
without the safety and security and certainty of being able to raise money regardless of the mistakes that you do, this is the best time to build, because then you have to be super focused on actually building something that people want.
Correct.
More specifically, something that people want to pay for,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
There's not going to be confusion. There's not going to be confusion whether this is a good idea, whether this is a good company or not, because this is the environment that forces you to think very sharply on that.
Sure.
And I have to admit, I made some adjustments in all my companies too since the funding winter, right? To ensure that we are directing the right amount of time, money, and energy to the right areas
Sure.
in order for us to build sustainable business models.
Sure.
So I personally think it's a blessing.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
even historically, that's been proven true. Like, for example, you look at the rise of Amazon or a
Yeah.
Google,
Mhm.
it coincides with the dot-com burst,
Exactly.
bubble burst in
Yeah.
US. I mean, I agree. I believe only the resilient ones,
Yeah.
only the resilient founders, resilient teams within these startups would survive. And I mean, I believe it's a cleanup of sorts. Much due probably.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree as well. Okay. Let's do a quick segment which we want to have as a constant throughout all the episodes we're gonna shoot.
Sure.
Right. So just consider me one of the investors, prospective investors,
Okay.
and you got to do a elevator pitch.
Right.
Right. So you got a minute. I'll time it. You got a minute. You got to pitch UpBanx
Okay.
to me.
Okay.
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 So whenever you're ready.
Cool. So at UpBanx, we are trying to serve Indonesia's $80 billion creative economy that basically provides jobs for 60% of the country's workforce. What we're trying to do is to give all of these people access to financing and the tools that they need to be able to do their jobs and to be able to unleash their creative minds. So the way we do this is using artificial intelligence in order to do one, build a credit profile that would grant access financing for these people. And then the second one is a generative AI tool for all of these creative minds to generate content at scale, which I believe these two things will create a positive feedback loop in which more productive businesses, more productive minds will be able to show more strengthened credit profiles, which then will be able to allow them to raise more financing and then do more work.
Where do I wire the money? Where do I wire the money?
Sounds like 2021.
It does. It does. It does.
Definitely 2021 sounding.
It does.
Hey, give me your bank account.
No, definitely. So, okay. I mean, we're moving towards the last leg of this chat. So, what's next? What's next for Wafa and UpBanx?
Sure. Well, right now I'm super laser focused on improving the sustainability and the unit economics across all of my companies.
Sure.
So right now, every day in and out, I'm laser focused on doing that. To get to a point where, assuming that we don't do further fundraising, we will continue as sustainable businesses. But we know exactly that's not what's going to happen, right? Eventually, the market will recover.
The market will correct itself.
Exactly. And eventually, the fundraising market will recover.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no point in worrying, and there's no point in waiting. There's no point in suspending or postponing things just because we're waiting for things to get better.
Mm-hmm.
So for me right now, the right direction to which I direct my focus and energy is to making sure all the companies are able to continue to run, continue to grow at a decent rate.
Sure.
Even if assuming that we don't do any further fundraising. But we know that's not going to be the case.
Well, I mean, but it's a good mindset. It's a very good mindset. I believe most startups should adopt this mindset because the uncertainty, at least for the next 12 to 18 months, is definitely out there.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it's makes sense. How about UpBanx expanding to the other countries in Southeast Asia or elsewhere? I mean, look, creator economy is pretty massive in Indonesia for sure.
Correct.
But I believe it's growing pretty quick in Philippines, from what I understand. South American countries, I mean, Brazil and Mexico are insane when it comes to this. Any plans?
Yeah. So just to give you an idea, right now we are across all of my companies. We're focused on Indonesia for the first phase.
Okay.
So UpBanx, we have about 2,000 customers. VC Gamers, we just hit 1 million users milestone last month.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And Modal Rakyat is going extremely fast as well. We just hit, I think, $1 billion disbursement milestone earlier this year. So, and all of those things happen just by focusing on Indonesia, right?
Sure.
But we see regional expansion opportunities for upThinks and VC Gamers because by nature, these products are global.
Global, and there's not much of a regulatory blockage out there.
Exactly.
Either ways.
For UpBanx and Modal Rakyat, realistically, yes, you can technically launch in different countries, but there's going to be regulatory barrier that you have to go through, right?
Sure.
And just based on previous startups, Indonesian startup experiences and expanding to different markets, I think it makes sense to focus on Indonesia first. I wouldn't say I'm an active angel investor, but I do dabble a bit in investing.
Sure. What do you look for? I mean, these are very early stage, pre-revenue mostly company. What are the attributes which you look for?
Definitely, I look for founders who are passionate in what they're building. That's super critical.
Sure.
Because you have to be passionate for what you're building, right? And then secondly is actually the adaptability of the product.
Okay.
Now, we know that ideas change. Startups pivot all the time.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
How adaptable is the business, is the company, is the product? If it's already too big or if the founders are already too fixated on a single idea or a single product, too rigid, right? Too attached to a single product or single idea, it's probably going to be very hard because at the end of the day, we know that investing in startups is actually investing in the founders.
Sure.
Right? So that flexibility and adaptability is very, very critical for me as an angel investor. I actually look at the potential for synergy. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
With
your ecosystem.
Yeah. With my ecosystem.
Correct.
Because I believe in partnerships, I believe in collaborations, I believe in synergy. And of all the companies that I'm currently involved in, you can easily see the synergy, right? So UpBanx basically works with Modal Rakyat. Modal Rakyat is the financing partner for UpBanx. And UpBanx serves the creator economy, right? Bebas is building a social investing platform in which financial influencers basically provide basically investment content for followers, right? And VC Gamers is squarely focused on building the gaming ecosystem, right? Providing a marketplace for gamers to trade. And gaming is a very, very specific vertical within the creator economy that is a bit different from
Absolutely.
every other
They operate very differently.
Exactly. They operate very differently, but it's also global.
Sure.
And it's huge.
Sure.
And gaming actually contributes, I think, while I was at YouTube, 40 to 50% of total YouTube watch time.
I'm sure.
A single vertical, right?
Yeah.
So there are all these different synergies. So when I invest, I look at potential synergy. So I cannot suddenly invest in something that has nothing to do with all of the other companies.
Sure.
So for me, that's a very important point as well.
So if let's say a budding entrepreneur wants to reach out to you,
Sure.
right? Wants to reach out to you, he or she feels that there are synergies.
Yeah.
How do they do that? I mean, do you generally accept people coming through recommendations, or do you have an outlet? How do you do that? I mean, this for the audience as well. If someone's building and wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah. Well, I get cold calls and cold messages all the time. Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
On LinkedIn and Instagram and email, and sometimes my WhatsApp number for some.
I love it, to be honest. I mean, I always appreciate people, especially entrepreneurs, who have this audacity to actually reach out to someone very cold.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a very thin line between being a creep as well as a cold message. But I feel that shows a lot of passion.
Yeah.
As well as that grit, and I feel shamelessness as well.
Yeah.
I believe you got to be shameful to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
In demanding things and asking for stuff.
If you want something, you have to go get it.
Get it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I would say probably in all of the cold calls and cold messages that I get, only 1% stand out, right?
Well, I mean, that is where you differentiate.
Exactly.
Right? Has the person done his study?
Yeah.
I mean, are you really conveying the right message out
Yes.
there? I agree completely.
So typically how I meet founders that I invest in or partner with are basically this 1% that really, really stood out.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
It's not just trying to reach out and arrange a meeting without any contact or
correct.
maybe trying to sell me something, right? This is what people typically do.
True.
That's the 99%. But this 1% typically come up with a super interesting idea, and it's probably now already a product that is live somewhere that I can actually use, and then maybe being used by someone that I know, for example, or solving a specific problem that I'm aware of, right? And typically those things are interesting.
Nice.
And then another way is typically interestingly is through me being as a customer. So when I'm a customer of a certain product or service, I'm typically always interested in knowing who are the founders of this company that sells a product or service.
Yeah.
And a lot of collaborations and partnerships happen that way as well for me. Yeah.
Nice.
I think that's also basically goes back to the idea that if you build a product that people want to use, eventually people will discover your product, right?
True.
And if it's really, really good, people would reach out to you organically, right? You don't even need to reach out to them. They will come to you.
True. Agree completely. Yeah. Okay. Probably my second last question before we let you go. What are the segments or sectors in Indonesia where you feel that the next big business can be created?
Other than the sectors that I'm currently in, because I'll be biased then.
No, I mean other than the sectors where you are invested directly, indirectly right now.
Sure. So I would say the advertising industry, I think it's a massive industry in Indonesia that is ripe for disruption. I think there's a lot of inefficiencies. There's a lot of bottlenecks in the advertising industry, and there's a lot of problems that can actually be solved through tech.
Sure.
That not a lot of people have tried to. So I think that's very interesting, and the reason why this is important for me is because Indonesians are typically not willing to pay for stuff. So which means for most companies, for a lot of companies that don't charge commissions or fees or interest, they have to then serve ads.
Correct.
To make money. Right?
Correct.
So if the model continues to run this way, then I think the advertising industry is going to continue to grow.
Sure.
right? And I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
We did not ask him to talk about this, like especially the advertisement part. We are solving this.
Okay.
At least we are trying to at Ketitik. We're trying to solve this. So yeah, it wasn't a paid one.
I swear I didn't know that you guys were trying to solve this, but maybe because of my experience at Google, YouTube, right, and right now in the creator economy, it's basically native advertising, right? That what
Agreed.
content creators do, right?
True.
So I think, but specifically for the concept of advertising itself, I think there's a lot of problems to be solved there as well.
Especially in the developing countries, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Where the consumers are in large numbers, but they're not really willing to pay easily.
Yeah.
I agree. And the final question.
Sure. I think there's a second sector actually.
Oh, please.
That I think
Please.
Could be big in Indonesia as well.
Sure.
It's actually the mental health sector.
Okay.
I believe that mental health is a problem that a lot of people just basically glance over. Like, okay, it's an issue. Here's some therapists. Here's some programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's some support centers that you can go to, blah, blah, blah. But it's not being seen as a critical problem, a bottleneck in the economy that needs to be solved.
I personally feel that the identification of one having a mental issue is the biggest bottleneck.
Yes.
I've had first-hand experience with people who are close to me who have just kept burying themselves with social media, with consuming
mindlessly scrolling.
Yeah, mindless scrolling, indulging in alcohol to numb themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas gradually they figure out that, okay, there is something wrong. So I believe that whole recognition of the fact that there is a problem is massive. I completely agree with you. That can be one very disruptive industry.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't know, maybe a test or whatever, which basically at least tells you that what is your mental health score.
Yeah.
I mean, you have your credit score. Let's have this as well.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, we have all the data points, how much time you're spending, what you're doing spending on. It can be done. I agree completely.
Yeah. And even though I'm working on AI technology, right, I believe in the fundamental strength of the human mind. I'm a big fan of the Dune series, right?
Sure.
Frank Herbert.
Yeah.
Basically, the series focuses on the strength of the human mind.
Correct.
So imagine if the full potential of the human mind. So this goes beyond mental health. This now reaches to mental strength discussion,
Sure.
right? If we can fully unleash the potential of the human mind and enable people to enhance their mental strength, I think it's gonna be boon to industries everywhere.
I'm sure. No, I completely agree. Especially with the rise of AI, I believe we should get ready.
It's even more critical.
It's even more critical.
Exactly.
Great. So the final question, how was your experience today? Do you think we missed anything which you would want to answer or you want to share about?
I think one thing that I probably want to say is that Indonesia as a country is now at a crossroad, right? It's elections here, right? And we're in a very interesting time.
Sure.
Geopolitically, right? With changing interests, shifting
power dynamics,
blocks and power dynamics, etc. So it's actually a very interesting time. And for a lot of Indonesians, this could be a very rare moment to make tremendous change in your life, right? And to see and to make impact. So whenever there's a crisis, there's always an opportunity.
True.
Especially in changing times. It's typically when change can easily happen.
Correct.
And there's no greater opportunity, a greater time to be able to make impact and to make great changes in your life when the entire world is changing dramatically.
True.
Yeah. So I would say go and do it.
Do it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Wafa.
Very well.
I really hope that you had a good chat with us.
Did.
And please download Ketitik app later.
We'll try it. We'll do
Read
that.
some news out there.
For sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care of
Thank you.
yourself.
Yeah.